a spring statement where you said to me that everyone would like more headroom, but no one wants more taxes, no one wants lower spending. I think we have the balance about right. And you gave me variations to that answer 3 times. Do you accept now that actually you got that balance wrong in the spring?
Well, I increased taxes by £40 billion in the budget last year, and I don't remember any party clamouring for more tax increases. And in fact, I think the Liberal Democrats oppose most of the ones that we are trying to take forward. So I did think we got the balance about right last year, but I was really clear that one of the objectives of this budget was to build further resilience and we were able to do that with £21.7 billion of headroom.
I know it seems esoteric, but I mean we've had reports coming out that saying that the inflated debt costs to the UK are worth about £7 billion a year. And we've all reflected on the speculation that's gone around this budget in terms of tax measures for the last 6 months, the policy uncertainty perhaps putting off investment as well. And so you obviously felt the need to correct the level of headroom this time. So why was it not a mistake previously to maintain a low amount of headroom in the spring?
Well, headroom went as low as £6.5 billion in the last Parliament. I built it up to £9.9 billion in my budget last year and in the spring statement. I felt that that was the right approach. But obviously, since then, we have had a number of global shocks. Whether those are shocks to trade, whether those are ongoing conflicts, whether those are disruptions to supply chains. And as a result, I believed it was the right thing to increase that headroom further to £21.7 billion, given the world in which we
I think
live
that
today.
was clear in last spring. But to move on to the second decision you've taken.
That's not
Well,
the case. Mr.
Correct,
I mean,
can I ask my next question?
well, just because when people come back and say, well, that was the case in the spring.
I asked these exact questions in the spring because you had to do a fiscal repair job in the spring,
yes.
obviously. We did have Trump's election already take place at that time. You had already lost the headroom between the autumn and the spring. So I think it's fair to say that many people thought that that headroom was already low in the spring. You've decided to correct it this time, but you're telling me it wasn't a mistake not to correct it in the spring.
Well, in the spring, the headroom would have been eroded without the actions that I took. I took the actions to keep the headroom at around £10 billion. But since then, you'll remember, the tariffs were introduced by Donald Trump that had not happened, and the OBR had not factored those into their forecasts in the spring. So I think things have changed since then, with respect, Mr. Dean.
I'd like to move on also to the decision to move towards one formal assessment by the OBR as well. Again, back in the spring, you said, some people were saying, don't worry about the headroom, you can address it in the autumn. I felt that would be the wrong decision because we've been very clear in our manifesto and our election campaign, and since we came to office, that fiscal stability is so important. So it's my understanding now that you're not going to make any adaptations based on what happened to headroom in the spring. So does that mean that fiscal stability is no longer important, or was that an incorrect statement to make in the spring?
Well, it does link to your previous question, Mr. Dean, because in the previous question you asked about the level of the headroom. We've now taken that to £21.7 billion, which, as you know, is more than the average movement in headroom between forecasts. So I now believe that we have the buffer in place.
The buffer enables you to make that decision.
So
can I just push you on the next question, which is, what circumstances would you feel like you would need to make adjustments in a spring statement? So 22 billion definitely gives you more buffer room, but is an erosion of 5 billion, 10 billion, 15 billion too much? At what point would you act in the spring instead of the autumn to address the headroom, which everybody will still be able to see whether or not a formal assessment is taking place?
So very few countries have 2 fiscal events a year, and we want to move towards, as the IMF have recommended, to have 1 major fiscal event a year. And we've worked with the
So in
OBR.
answer to Mr. Dean's question, if you may, just on where you would make a judgment.
At what point would you give yourself more headroom? Understand that.
Yeah, we've
and
got the question.
you're not going to take any
So the Chancellor's had the
autumn.
question, so
Yeah,
if you
fine.
could just answer the question, Chancellor.
Yes, if you give me that opportunity, I'd be delighted to. I reserve the right to be able to take action at any point, but I believe the headroom that we have and the changes that we've made means that I won't need to do that in the spring. But of course, I reserve the right at any time to take action.
Thank you for now, Mr. Dean. Are you and Young MP?
Thank you. I wanted to move on to special educational needs and disabilities funding. At the budget, you announced that this would no longer be borne by local authorities, but would be borne from central departmental spending. Will this be put, well, firstly, the OBR says that this will cost around 5.6 billion. Do you and the Treasury accept that number? And will this be put on one particular department, or will it be spread among a number of departments? And if so, how will it be spread among departments?
Chancellor.
Thank you very much for that question. What we have done, what we did in the spending review, was continue the statutory override for an additional 2 years, so during which time local governments, if they overspend compared with their forecasts on this, they can put the costs on central government. We've extended that for a further couple of years, but then, as we were really clear in the spending review, we will then fund SEND through the overall government DEL override envelope, and that statutory override ends in 2027-28. Where I would sort of disagree with the OBR, and well, not necessarily disagree, but the OBR looked at absorbing that SEND pressure from just one budget line. That is not what we said in the spending review. They just gave that as an illustrative example. So I don't recognise those impacts on school spending. As you know, the Education Secretary at the moment, with the relevant minister, is doing a review of SEND. That focus of that review is getting the system right, because no parent, no constituency MP believes the system works well today.
Thank you. Ms. Yang.
You're saying that the 5.6 billion number from the OBR is based on the current policy, and that policy is going to change, so therefore the number itself may not be that number. Is that what you're saying, Chancellor?
No, what I was saying is that the OBR's illustrative example is that SEND pressure is absorbed on one budget line. That is not what we set out. But the purpose of the SEND review is about delivering a system that works for families, for children, and for schools. And it's right that the Education Secretary, not the Chancellor, leads on that.
Yeah. Ms. Coughlin, MP.
Thank you. Chancellor, in October 2021, my 17-year-old constituent, Jennifer Chalkley, who was autistic, died of avoidable suicide. I fully acknowledge the role that perhaps the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives had in terms of scrapping Sure Start, in terms of contributing to this crisis. Can I have your assurance, please, that you will properly fund both the Department for Education and Children's Mental Health Services to end the SEND crisis in this country? Because if you do, not only would that be a fantastic legacy for a Labour government, but also it would enable me to go back to Jen's mum and tell her that her daughter's death had not been in vain.
Okay.
Thank you very much, and for bringing up that example, and please give best wishes of me and I think all of the committee to Jen's family for what they went through. Too many parents and children are let down by the SEND system. Anyone that's a parent knows that, and any constituency MP, and you've only been a constituency MP for a year and a half, but you will know through your postbag and through your surgeries and your visits to your schools and talking to families in your constituency that the system just doesn't work. And we have to reform it. My mum was a special needs teacher when I was little, and she then became a classroom teacher because there were cuts then to special needs teaching, and it meant that kids weren't getting the support they needed. So this is something that matters to me, including as a parent. But it should not be me leading the work on SEND. I'm the Chancellor. It is right that Bridget Phillipson and the Department for Education lead on this, but to say to Jen's parents and family directly, we want this system to work for them. We want it to work for families. We want it to work for young people. We know it's let them down. This is about devising a system that is inclusive and that enables all children, whatever their abilities, whatever challenges that they face, to fulfil their potential and to live fulfilling lives. And that is the commitment I will give to Jen's parents and to
We obviously all look forward to the SEND review coming out, we think, in the new year. Thank you very much, Mr. Coughlin. Yuan Yang, MP.
Thank you, Chair. Yesterday we spoke to the Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of England, and as you may have seen, there was disagreement on the committee, and there has been since their last meeting, on the impact of quantitative tightening of the active sales of gilts on the interest rates that the government faces for borrowing. The bank staff's estimate of this cost to the taxpayer has gone up over the last year. Does the Treasury have its own estimates of the cost of quantitative tightening to the taxpayer?
If it's okay, I'm going to pass this question. We've discussed this at length, but I'll pass it to the Permanent Secretary.
Well, it falls to the lot of being Treasury Permanent Secretary to have to answer questions about quantitative tightening. So it's a monetary policy matter, as you know, and as such for the Bank of England. But in terms of understanding what is happening, because it's a deeply complex thing, it's worth saying that there are three areas where you send out. So the OBR, in their recent forecast, set out detailed projections, including of the losses they expect and the impact on all their fiscal metrics. The Treasury's annual report and accounts sets out the impact on departmental spending budgets, and the bank provides quarterly reports with its projections of cash transfers.
Yeah.
To the nub of your question, each September, the Monetary Policy Committee decide on what they want to do in terms of sales for the coming year, and they announce that. That's not something that we is our decision. They did that last September. They actually reduced some of the active sales they were doing and did some things on skew. So
They're increasing their active sales.
No,
they've
reduced.
They're reducing the overall
Yeah.
pace of
I think more things are maturing, so there's less need for active sales. So it is all set out there, and it is all in our accounts and all the rest of it. Okay. And of course, as everyone knows, there were cash transfers to the Treasury up until the end of 2022, and now each quarter there's transfers back to the AP.
Yeah. Chancellor, I know that from the MPC's perspective, as they've stated very clearly, value for money for the taxpayer is not in their remit in monetary policy. But of course, as the Chancellor and as the Treasury, value for money is certainly something that concerns the Treasury and also all of us constituency MPs. Do you have conversations with the Governor about the value for money impact on the taxpayer from their pace of QT?
I don't think it's accurate to say that value for money doesn't need to be taken into account. Value for money does.
Yeah, the MPC states that they do not take that into account in their principles because that is not one of theirs.
Yeah, but the Bank of England do, and the MPC and the Bank of England are a little bit different. I don't know, James.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, it's their decision and it's not ours. But I think I think it is unfair to say that they don't take value for money into account. Yeah. They take that into account as well as the impact on their monetary policy. And they've written to the committee a whole set of times, including on that. And I think you did a report on it last year, which explored those very issues.
Thank you, Rachel. The predecessor committee did good work on that. Luke Murphy, MP.
Thank you, Chair. Chancellor, my constituents, or a vast majority of them, the top priority is cost of living. Both yourself and the Prime Minister have made clear that that is a top priority for the government as well. Evidence to the committee from both the OBR and the Resolution Foundation show that there's been relatively strong growth in real household disposable income in this Parliament thus far, but the outcome for the remainder of the Parliament is quite bleak. Do you recognise those forecasts? Do you expect to beat them? And if so, how?
Thank you very much for that question. I think the growth rate of RHDI per capita is expected to be positive in every year of the forecast. But you're right to say, and this reflects the answer I gave, I think, to John Grady earlier about the impacts of the productivity downgrade isn't just a fiscal impact. That's the one that all the concentration has been on, but of course the most immediate impact is on the size of the economy and therefore the money available for wages and everything else, which is why, as I said, I'm determined to beat that forecast. But living standards, I guess, are sort of determined by the income you've got coming in and how much you're paying out. And as I said in my speech on the 4th of November, I was determined that one of the things that we achieved in this budget was cutting the cost of living. And as the Deputy Governor said yesterday, next year that will be 0.4, 0.5% off of CPI. There are sort of three primary things we're doing to achieve that. the £150 off of energy bills by scrapping eco entirely and taking other levies off bills, freezing prescription charges for the second year in a row, and also freezing rail fares, which I know will be a big issue for constituents of yours in Basingstoke, the first time that's happened in 30 years.
Thank you. Do you anticipate having to come back in future budgets to take similar measures on the cost of living? Is that something you would expect, given the outlook for living standards that the OBR and you have just recognised?
Chancellor.
Well, I think the OBR and the bank expect inflation to peak this year, to fall, I think, on average of 2.5% next year before reaching target at 2% the following year, and for the remainder of the forecast period. The reductions in energy bills and the freeze in other prices, and indeed the freeze in fuel duty until September next year, all contribute to inflation coming down quicker than would have than we previously thought. We then need to continue trying to boost productivity and growth to put more money in people's pockets, but the focus in this budget was specifically on costs, which is why we introduced that package of measures.
Thank you very much. Jim Dixon, MP.
Yeah, I think many people will welcome the redistribution within the budget, where you can see each decile as you go lower down the income scale doing better. Do you, however, believe that might be a problem, the squeezed middle problem that we've seen in this country for many years, in which people in the middle of the income distribution are finding it very difficult to maintain their living standards, particularly as they get further towards the tax thresholds in which their income is then taxed at a higher rate?
Mm-hmm. First of all, Mr Dixon, I'm very disappointed you haven't mentioned the Lower Thames crossing. I think it's the first time I've had a conversation with you and you haven't. But I will address your actual question. The distribution analysis that we published alongside the budget shows that every income decile, except for the top, is better off through the measures that we have taken in the last two budgets, but the biggest beneficiaries are in the bottom couple of income deciles, particularly as we lift children out of poverty, which we're very, very pleased to be able to do at this budget. I do recognise that we've asked everyone to contribute by freezing the thresholds for an additional 3 years on top of the 7 years for which they've already been frozen, but we were able to keep those contributions to a minimum by asking those with the broader shoulders to pay more, and some of those specific taxes, whether it's on landlords, to rebalance the tax system, but, so that whatever form of income you have, we're narrowing the gap between the tax rates that you pay on it and things like the high value council tax, which obviously paid by some of the more wealthy people in the country.
Thank you, Mr Dixon. Okay, thank you very much. Bobby Dean.
Thank you. Just following on from that question about the squeezed middle, there's been some analysis done since the budget about the impact on the 1% or even the 0.1%, and people claim that if you look at those categories, it's not as distributive as the Treasury's graphs present. Mr Bowler, do you do any analysis, distribution analysis, in regards to the 1% or 0.1% internally?
Well, we do. No, we do. Our focus is on the distribution analysis we do, which is really, really rather good, I have to say. I'm very proud of it. It's deeply thorough. It's been complimented for how we do it and the level we get into. All the rest of it, we've done it for some time in that way. So that's the focus we do, and it focuses on deciles. I don't know whether Darmish has any more to say on that.
So we focus on deciles, as the PEMSEC says. We don't have the data on a consistent basis to be able to do things like the top 0.1%. Obviously, that doesn't stop in individual policies from being able to look at focuses of distribution.
Chancellor, I just wanted to ask you if you recognise this analysis that's out there. There's obviously increasing scrutiny about the top 1% and the top 0.1%, particularly as those on middle to higher incomes are starting to really feel the pinch. Do you think that it would be a good idea for the Treasury to start modelling this as well, so you can get a true distributive effect?
I think it is quite hard because of the numbers, but let me just sort of give you one example. Higher value council tax on properties more than £2 million affects less than 1%. Is it 0.6?
Just under 1%.
Yeah, okay. Just under 1% of properties. The non-dom changes obviously affects a very small number of people, as does the change around treating carried interests as income rather than capital gains in private equity. So all of those are taxes paid by a very small number of the most wealthy people.
Would you commit to trying to look into that in the future?
As I say, it is quite hard just because of the numbers involved to have an accurate
You could have a dialogue in writing about this, because I think it's an interesting point, and you rightly raise
we can, but I would just caution.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm recognising your caution, and maybe it's a conversation we can have through official routes. Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Dean. And Chancellor, we want to talk about some of the specific measures. We've obviously know your broad brush issues, which you've repeated a few times, so we don't need to go into those again. If we can answer we'll ask specific questions. If you can answer those, then you can tell us all the detail of your budget. So over to Mr. John Glenn to kick off.
Yes, could I turn first to threshold freezes, Chancellor? At the 24 budget, you said, I'm keeping every single promise on tax that I made in our manifesto, so there'll be no extension of the freeze in income tax and national insurance thresholds. Now, you told us earlier it's not a breach of the manifesto. How can we square those two statements?
Our manifesto was very clear. It referred to the rates of income tax and national insurance and the rate of VAT. But I have been very clear, I'm not trying to shy away from it in any way, that this is everyone makes a contribution through freezing those thresholds. I'm not trying to sort of sneak it out and pretend it doesn't exist. I was very explicit in the speech that I gave in the Chamber and in every subsequent interview that working people will pay from 2028 a bit more in tax, but we've managed to keep that as low as possible because of the other changes that we've introduced.
But do you recognise, if you look at the distributional analysis, that increasing the headline rate of income tax is more progressive than threshold freezes?
I don't recognise that. I think that they are broadly similar. So no, I don't recognise that.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Chancellor, you obviously took a decision to change the way that salary sacrifice worked. Can you just explain what was the reason? I mean, obviously you had to raise money. Was there a particular reason you focused on that area?
Yeah. So the cost of salary sacrifice left unchecked will go up by 3 times in the next few years.
So it'll multiple of 3.
Yeah. So no one had expected that when salary sacrifice schemes started getting up and running. We already spend £70 billion a year on pensions tax relief. We're not changing that at all, nor are we changing how much you can take out tax-free as a lump sum. But salary sacrifice was only ever really expected to top up pensions rather than being the main vehicle.
It was pensions that was your particular focus, because obviously salary sacrifice is for other things. It wasn't because people were using it for other approaches.
What do you mean by that?
Well, you have salary sacrifice for other things like gym membership, extra holiday, or expensive bikes. Yeah.
No, the focus on this was around the tax treatment for salary sacrifice for pension savings.
Because Tom Josephs told us last week that it was likely to reduce pension savings, and obviously there's a big concern about people not, especially young people. There's a lot of evidence they're not saving enough for their pensions. How did you weigh up that impact with the decision to reduce salary sacrifice for pensions?
Well, in the last few years, pension savings have increased, primarily because of automatic enrolment into pensions. I think about 11 million people who weren't previously saving for pensions are now now doing so. I think the last few years, cost of living has put pressure on how much people can put in to save for retirement, but hopefully that is beginning to ease as a pressure. But you can still put £2,000 in and have exactly the same tax benefits as you previously had, but any contribution over £2,000, which you're still able to make, will get the pension tax relief, but not the additional salary sacrifice relief. And that is the tax relief that was always supposed to be applied to pensions. Salary sacrifice was only ever expected to top up pensions, but it has been increasingly use of the main vehicle. And also we saw a lot of people paying bonuses, large bonuses, in through salary sacrifice to take advantage of that tax treatment in a way that just was never envisaged. And one of the things that we did in this budget, one of the things I did in this budget was to ensure that some things that were introduced for very good reason but have ended up costing multiples more than what were originally expected, that we took them back to their original purpose. And that's the same for things like employee ownership trusts, for example.
There's a lot of, I mean, we haven't got time to go into all of it today, and maybe we should have the pensions minister in on this, but our sister committee deals with pension policy. But you've got on the one hand an encouragement to put into stocks and shares ISAs, which we'll be touching on in a moment. You've then decreasing the opportunity to top up pension, and a 5% contribution, as Ruth Curtis told us last week, on an individual earning $46,000 a year means they will have to pay more national insurance. So you've got different incentives working in different ways. Is there any plans in the Treasury to have a really good route, well, from Treasury with DWP, to have a root and branch review of how pensions policy works? Because, as you say, auto-enrolment's been very useful, but it's not enough to fund retirement.
We have set up a pensions commission. Yep. The Minister for Pensions has done that, who will look at these issues. But I want to be very, very clear that people can still use salary sacrifice to save for a pension. They will have, and they will still get pensions tax relief, which is the usual way of saving for a pension. So pensions tax relief above £2,000 very much still exists. It will be ordinary pensions tax relief, though. Okay.
Thank you for that. Dame Harriet-Fordman.
Thank you, Chair. Chancellor, in your budget you say that the High Street will benefit from permanently lower business rates for retail, hospitality and leisure. And I think you will have heard that the reality for a lot of these High Street businesses is in fact that they're looking at the detail and they feel that they will struggle to survive with the higher rates bills that are coming, on top of the rising employment costs, on top of their rising energy bills. To give a few examples, and we'll all have heard them in our constituency postbags, pubs are facing a 15% rise. There's music venues in Newcastle, 431% rise. The British Beer and Pub Association says community pubs up 63%. So would you accept, Chancellor, that a lot of these businesses feel misled by that statement?
So let me set out what is happening with business rates, because there's a couple of things happening at the same time. The last time that the Valuation Office looked at the rateable values of property was in 2021, and of course that was in the middle of the pandemic. And so many rateable values fell sharply during the pandemic. They've now been revalued, and of course those rateable values are now higher because we are no longer during a lockdown in a pandemic. At the same time, during the pandemic, there was temporary support given to a number of businesses to support them with business rates. The previous government put in temporary support that finished in the last year of that government. They didn't allocate any money for future. In my first budget, I put in additional support for the first year, and in this budget we've put another £4.3 billion of additional support in as we transition to more normal valuations and rates. But what we've also done in this budget is to permanently lower the business rates, the tax rates that are applied to properties for eligible retail, hospitality and leisure businesses, and that is paid for by a higher rate on the top 1% of properties, particularly distribution centres that are used by online companies. So there will be permanently lower rates for those sectors. But as we transition, we've put in £4.3 billion of support for the types of businesses that you refer to. And so I think the average pub will be getting a 4% increase in rates this year, and the rates are capped at 15% or £800 for smaller venues this year, and that support continues at a phased down rate for the next couple of years. But we're moving to a system where we have permanently lower rates on those venues.
Can I just urge you to look at this again, Chancellor, because UK Hospitality would dispute that. They think a 15% hike on average for pubs. So I'll just leave that out there.
Thank you very much.
15% is the cap. So that's the highest it can be.
They're saying the average pub will get that cap.
No.
That's what they're saying.
Yeah. No, the average is 4% and there's a cap of 15%.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarity, Chancellor. Danger Siobhan McDonald.
Thank you. Chancellor, we're aware of a kind of intergenerational unfairness that is perceived as going on, and I just wanted to look at the issues of lifetime ISAs that you announced in your budget. Now, everybody accepts that lifetime ISAs have design flaws, but launching a full consultation and creating a completely new product which may not exist for some years, feels like a disproportionate response to problems that could potentially be fixed within the current system. Why not simply fix the existing lifetime ISA rather than design a completely new product that young first-time buyers may take some time to see?
There's a lot of scepticism about the current product. A lot of lenders won't offer it because of design flaws in the way it was set up and a lack of clarity about who the product is suitable for. And many lenders don't want to, many banks and societies don't want to offer it because they don't want to be later accused of misselling a product. So there are a number of flaws with the existing system, and there have been a number of criticisms, including from people like Martin Lewis, about the withdrawal fees and also about the value of property that you can buy, and also the confusion about whether it is a vehicle for saving for retirement or a vehicle for paying for your for a first home. So we are now doing a proper piece of work, designing a better product that's much clearer to people, and we certainly don't intend this to take a number of years.
Do you have any idea of timescales?
We want to crack on with it, but we didn't feel ready this budget to announce a new product that we would have confidence in. So we want to take a little bit longer to get that right. But there are well-documented concerns about the lifetime ISA. We want to help people to get on the housing ladder, not convinced that the product that we've got is working well enough for people today.
And just looking at the age differential for investing in a cash ISA, do you think it's fair that young people who want to save for that mortgage deposit are being forced into a more volatile stocks and shares, while retirees are allowed greater freedom to save in cash? Why was 65 chosen rather than the state pension age? And do you think that this creates a real perception of unfairness for young savers who are anxious about not having too much risk and knowing that they can get that deposit?
Yeah. There aren't many young people that can put aside £20,000 a year in savings. I think we all know that. The biggest challenge for young people today is getting a job that pays a decent wage, not about whether they can access the full £20,000 of ISA savings. The reason that we had that age limit in is because as you get older, the time horizon in which you're investing in is not as long for obvious reasons, and so we wanted to make sure that in later life you can be very confident that you've got that money there. But if you had invested £1,000 a year in an ISA from 1999 to now, if you'd put that £1,000 a year into a stocks and shares ISA, you'd have £50,000 more now in your account than if you'd put it into a cash ISA. And I want more people to be able to benefit from a growing economy and growing stock markets. And at the moment, a combination of those ISA limits, but also the advice and guidance rules, mean that very few people, not enough people, are benefiting from that. We're changing advice and guidance. That comes in from the next tax year. The ISA changes come in the tax year after that. So we've got time to test out how this new advice and guidance is going to work. But it will enable banks and building societies and others to nudge people into putting their money into more productive assets. And I would like to see more of a culture in the UK of retail investing and people of all ages being able to benefit from a growing economy.
Okay. Thank you.
Is that not going to require more financial education in school?
Yeah, and we are, as part of the financial inclusion strategy that my colleague, the Economic Secretary to the Treasury, Lucy Rigby, introduced, the financial inclusion strategy, we are introducing, including at primary schools, a better education on budgeting and saving. I think that is an important part of it, but the advice and guidance reforms are things that people have been calling for a long time, and I'm confident working with the regulators, the banks and building societies, that will result in better outcomes for savers.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dame Siobhan. Bobby Dean MP.
Chair, Chancellor, just now you mentioned wanting to fix some of the tax relief so they operate as intended. You'll be aware, I think there's over 1,200 on the books, and I think only around 300 of them have ever been properly evaluated for their cost and their effectiveness. I presented a bill to Parliament called Tax Measures Evaluation Bill, where it commits the government to look into all of them. Can you commit to look into all the tax reliefs and making sure they are all working as intended?
So I hope you see in this budget and last year's budget, actually primarily due to the work from the former Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury, who's now the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, and the new Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury. We've done some really good work on cracking down on tax avoidance and closing loopholes. I think it's going to save something like £10 billion a year by the final year of the forecast. And that is just getting the tax that we are already due, but we're not collecting today. And that's both debt and also
Just
BAU.
will you commit to looking at them all?
We're very happy. And if you've got any ideas, we're also always in the market, Mr. Dean. So we've already done a lot of work in this area, but the job is not done until there is a gap between the tax that is due and the tax that is paid. There is more work to do. So of course we'll carry on looking at all of those.
Thank you. I think you'd have a lot of support from both this committee and the sister committee, the Public Accounts Committee, which have doggedly tried to get to the bottom of this. So if you want to lean into that, I'm sure you'll get some help from Parliament. Yuan Yang MP.
Thank you, Chair. Chancellor, in your budget speech, you mentioned that a fair society is one where the wealthiest pay their fair share, and you discussed narrowing the gap between the tax on income from assets and income from work. Is there more left of that gap to be narrowed?
So what we did what I did in the budget was to increase by 2 percentage points the basic rate on dividend savings and property income, and made some changes to the additional higher rates as well. I think that is the right thing to do. 2 percentage point increase is quite a big increase in the tax rate on any form of income, but I think we got the balance right in the budget on that.
And is there space for more narrowing, or do you believe the gap has been fully closed now?
Well, obviously, if you go out to work, you pay national insurance, and you don't pay national insurance on other forms of income. But we have taken action in this budget to narrow the gap between those different forms of income.
Thank you very much, Ms Yang. Jim Dixon MP.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Big change in the budget on electric vehicle excise duty. We haven't had that tax before. Obviously, it's designed to compensate for the loss of fuel duty over time. Isn't there a big problem, though, that by 2050, electric vehicle excise duty will only be bringing in about a quarter of what fuel duty did? So is it not inevitable you're going to have to very significantly raise that amount going forward?
Well, we have set the level of the EVED at half the rate that you would get from fuel duty. I think that is the right balance, because we do want to incentivise the rollout of electric vehicles for reasons that is well understood. We have no plans to increase that further, and wouldn't do so until the move to electric vehicles is well secured. But we set it at a half rate for a reason.
And in terms of fuel duty and the freeze, what's your commitment going forward around what happens into the future on that, and the plan to end the freeze in a year's time?
So we've frozen it until September next year, but at the same time we're also, from early in the new year, introducing something new called the Fuel Finder. This is work that's been led by the Competition and Markets Authority, and something that other countries already do, that will mean that real-time information will be available on fuel costs at different petrol stations, and we hope to be able to integrate that with the different apps that people use to map their journeys and everything, and so they'll be able to see the different prices at different petrol stations on their route, and evidence from other countries and from the CMA, I think, suggests that that could take off around £40 a year from how much people pay in filling up their tanks, and I hope will result in more competition and lower prices for consumers.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Dixon. And John Glenn, MP.
Yes, could I turn to gambling taxes, please, Chancellor? The consultation that you had began with a desire to simplify, and indeed this committee looked at the matter as well. We're now, after your measures in the budget, we've got online bets duty higher than the high street. We've got bets on UK racing lower than Irish racing. We've got tax on a game of football on the phone will be 25%, while a machine in adult gaming centre will be 20%. Now, you've given 26 million to the Gambling Commission, but there is a significant risk, and I think we're seeing it already online, of lots of activity going off to the black market. I'm just wondering, what your overall assessment is of the measures that you've made, and if you could address, the fact that there are sort of multiple dimensions to what you've ended up with here.
So we did have a consultation, and we've been consulting for around a year on this. I think that is a good way to make policy, and we've spoken to all the different stakeholders, and that's why there was a lot of things going on. So we decided not to do anything about in-person betting, to do nothing around horse racing, and also we've managed to take tax off bingo entirely, because I think there's lots of good social benefits. We also didn't do anything about machine gambling, because we were concerned around things like seaside towns and around incomes in pubs, for example. But there was plenty of evidence that online gaming in particular, but also betting, does result in more serious harms than in person, and that's why we chose the package that we chose, which had the biggest increases for online gaming and then increases for online betting. And actually there was a wider theme in the budget about rebalancing the tax system away from taxing physical trading and more tax online. That's true for business rates. It's true for taxing low value, applying customs to low value imports, and it also applies to gambling. That was a theme running through the budget, that high street should not be undercut by online. But there's a specific issue here as well about the harms that have been doing. Now, you mentioned the black market. That, of course, was something that we factored into our deliberations when we designed this policy. And obviously, we could have taken those tax rates higher, but we chose not to, exactly because of the concerns that you have mentioned. And we've also put money into at the budget to tackle the issues of the illegal market. £26 million allocated to the Gambling Commission.
Can I just ask you finally on that? I understand your logic, but some of these companies are configured with cross subsidies in different parts of their business, and in essence, do you expect to see a restructuring in the industry now consequential of this? Because it seems quite likely that some will not find it viable because of the nature of the subsidy from different parts of their businesses, and some of them are already going into difficulties and going offshore.
Well, obviously these taxes apply whether the company is offshore or not, because it is a tax on the bet. And again, that was an important design of this policy, that you can't just relocate overseas to get out of paying that tax. We also are making it relatively more attractive to do betting in real life rather than online, and that was a deliberate design of the policy. Look, I recognise that everything has consequences, but so do the harms of gambling have consequences, and that was also a consideration in this budget. There has been a huge growth in online betting and gaming, and I think it is right that we tax it more appropriately and have a level playing field between the high street and online businesses. And of course, all the money from this is being used to reduce child poverty.
Thank you for that. So with this committee cross-party, obviously put out our report on that very point. So thank you for that answer and for that action. Luke Murphy, MP.
Thank you, Chair. Chancellor, the capital allowance changes in the budget, could you set out how they will increase investment and growth, given that tax specialists like Dan Needle have said they believe the changes will do the opposite?
So we have kept the main rate of corporation taxes at 25%, and we've stuck to all of the commitments we made in the business tax roadmap that I published at the last budget. We also have one of the most generous and competitive capital allowances regimes. And what we are doing, what I have done at the budget, is decreasing the main rate of write-down allowances, just the main rate, by 4 percentage points to 14% from April next year. And that has allowed us to fund a new first-year allowance, whilst also raising revenue to protect public finances. So it's also consistent with what we're trying to do in introducing more generous upfront relief for investments, and we'll be doing that as well for some of those leasing of equipment and machinery that isn't eligible for the full expensing, to now get a more generous first year allowance. This is about trying to encourage investment, but it is within the context as well of needing to raise money in this budget. But I think the net present value of investments remains the same.
The first year discount that doesn't apply to second-hand assets, it is only to leasing. So you can
see the direction of travel though. So we've made permanent full expensing, and this year for things that aren't covered by full expensing, we're introducing a more generous first year allowance. But if you're asking, is there more to do on this? Yes, I think there is in a range of areas like the one you've mentioned, also on more around intangibles. But what we're trying to do is incentivise investment, because investment is absolutely key to economic growth.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Murphy. Bobby Dean, MP.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if I could ask you about one small thing that happened after the budget, which is the US-UK trade deal over drugs, and it's going to cost apparently an extra £3 billion per year. There's been a lot of worry from NHS leaders about where that money's going to come from. Is that to come from within the existing Department of Health and Social Care budget?
That was part of the agreement in the spending review, that for this spending review period, that would be absorbed. The costs are actually quite low in the first couple of years, and that was part of the spending review settlement. But obviously, at future spending reviews,
will be worked out in the next spending review.
Well, obviously, everything in the next spending review will be set out in the next spending review.
Thank you.
Chris Coughlin, MP.
Thank you, Chair. Chancellor, just a quick follow-up on R&D. Draghi in September urged the EU to...
The man with a dog with a bone here.
Nothing but predictable.
Exactly. No, next one's up. Urged the EU to borrow for defence R&D, stating that that would actually decrease debt to GDP, because GDP would grow faster than interest costs, and also that a 2% increase in total factor productivity would cut public finance burden by a third over a decade. Do you think a similar principle could apply or approach could apply to the UK?
So we're already embarking on the biggest uplift in defence spending since the end of the Cold War, taking it to 2.6% by April 2027. Although every department apart from the NHS and Defence have had to make some further efficiency savings towards the end of the Parliament, that is not the case. Well, they have to make efficiency savings, but they can reinvest them. Unlike other departments, and we have totally protected the capital budgets, and obviously defence is highly capital intensive. The changes that I made to the fiscal rules last year as well take capital spending outside the stability rule. It's still affected by the investment rule, but that has also made it easier to protect capital spending, because it has been the case that previous chancellors, when faced with challenging fiscal situations, would go first to the capital budget and delay projects or cancel projects or extend the life of projects, and that's not the decision that I wanted to make. But it's also really important that we spend the money well, and that's why, as part of the defence investment plan, we are allocating more money to start-up businesses, to tech businesses, to really get that innovation, actually building on quite a lot of what happens in the US.
Thank you.
And finally, as you know, the National Bureau of Economic Research in the US has published an estimate of the Brexit cost of 6 to 8% of GDP, effectively a 90 billion Brexit black hole. Given this, do you support the Liberal Democrat proposals for an EU customs union, several Labour MPs do?
Good try. I think the OBR is sticking to their numbers around of a 4% hit, but is still very material. It's why we've got this reset with the EU, and why we are at the moment negotiating around a new food and farming agreement, energy trading, electricity trading, Erasmus, and a new youth mobility scheme, because we recognise that making it hard to trade with your nearest neighbours and trading partners is not exactly good for businesses and not exactly very good for growth.
Thank you. Well, I think we can all agree on that. Just wanted to quickly follow up on an answer you gave to Mr. Glenn about threshold freezes. And it is, the facts are that if somebody is earning around £70,000 a year, which is a lot in known parts of the country, but in parts of London, for example, that's not a salary that's as easy to live on as it may sound. Somebody on that salary will see roughly the same tax rise as a Premier League footballer or other high earners. Do you see that as progressive?
I think the question that Mr. Glenn was putting to me was whether increasing rates versus freezing would be much different, and overall, and I would say that 70,000 is around twice the national average wage.
But is that somebody who should be paying the same roughly as a Premier League?
Well, they're not paying the same, are they?
The same tax rise. The rise would be similar.
Well, our distribution analysis shows that they are pretty similar, but I would also say that 70,000 is going to put you in the top decile.
So when you say pretty similar, just to be clear, the threshold freeze versus any tax increase, that's what you're referring to when you say similar?
Yes, the answer
just making sure, just because in the record. You obviously will do modelling of impact of policies on different households. With the challenge with the decisions you've made, because you've got lots of different tax changes, is how they interact with each other. How have you changed any way that, partly because of you've taken that approach, any way you're doing that evaluation of impact on certain types of households?
Well, the OBR look at the interaction of policies when they look at the indirect effects of the budget package as a whole, so they are taken into account in the forecast, and the distribution analysis obviously takes into account all of the policies and how they interact with each other.
Often the problem is there's unintended consequences. There's nothing different the Treasury is doing on this you're relying on the OBR? Just a simple question.
Of course, we look at these things ourselves, but the numbers that published, including the indirect
You do
effects,
look at them yourselves as well, so you're taking that fully into account.
Well, yes, but we look at things like, the sectoral impact of policies, the policies on families with children, the policies on pensioner households.
I just wanted it clear for the record, because I
yes.
suggest that you do that. That's fine. And then you talked about efficiencies for departments. And you're tracking that closely. So perhaps really for the Permanent Secretary, has anything changed in the way that the Treasury is tracking those efficiencies compared with the past?
No, from the past, I guess the fact that we use the Office for Value for Money to come in and work with departments to set up and measure, set up what the efficiencies would be, that was announced as Penny View, and set out how they'll be measured, including, I think, referencing in annual report and accounts. So that's new from previous spending reviews.
Okay, and because there's no Office of Value for Money now, so that's now back into the Treasury teams.
They've done exactly what we asked them really well, and that's now all set up.
The public spending teams will be looking at that for each one, as usual. Okay, that's fine. Good. Harriet.
Thank you very much. This is just for Mr. Bowler. It's a technical point on the business rates questions I was asking the Chancellor earlier. The Treasury website gives some worked examples of how the transitional relief will be applied, and that is a maximum cap versus the 40% discount that was in place. The letter that's gone out from the Ministry of Housing and Local Government to the councils that will actually implement this change does not have the 40% in it. So actually is a much more significant increase. So could you take that away, Permanent Secretary, and just make sure that the letter that goes out from MHCLG is exactly consistent with the guidance of the Treasury and the intention that the Chancellor clearly set out in her reply?
Yeah. Can I also say, Dame Harriet, I recognise that businesses are crunching through all the numbers now, and I just would urge all businesses and also parliamentarians when we're interacting to make sure that businesses understand the transitional relief, because I know there have been a number of businesses who have seen the headlines without understanding the transitional relief, and obviously the two go together.
And
so
the
thank you for
letter
raising
apparently
this.
from MHCLG is incorrect, it sounds like, so perhaps that could be
Definitely look at
clarified.
That sounds like an urgent matter for the Permanent Secretary to get off. So on which point I will thank you, our witnesses, very much indeed. Thank you to the Chancellor, the Right Honourable Rachel Reeves MP. I'm not sure the budget never ends. You're probably thinking about the next one already, but at the end of this, sort of a full stop at the end of this budget cycle, to James Bowler, the Permanent Secretary, to Dharmesh Nai, first-time attendant at this session. The transcript of this session will be available on the website uncorrected in the next couple of days, with thanks to our colleagues at Hansard and thanks to Bowtie for the broadcasting. Thank you very much indeed. Order.